If you love true crime, you've probably heard at least one story about a cult. Cults are characterized by unique religious beliefs that are devoted to one person in charge. Some of the time, these cults are harmless, but other times, they end in violence, misery, and death. What would you do if you were told that you had to die for your religion? The Waco Siege records the story of what started off as any other religious group, but its members went down in history as the cult that tried to go to war with the government, ending in a 51-day standoff and over 75 lost lives. Our story begins with a man named Victor Houteff, a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Their beliefs are defined as strict, legalistic, and difficult to upkeep. They believed firmly in the second coming of Christ, that Christ would come down to earth and save humanity from their own sin and destruction. Houteff believed in the second coming, but in a much more radical way. He was obsessed with Revelation, the final book of the Bible. It speaks on the apocalyptic last days of earth before Christ comes to save the sinners who choose to repent. The book speaks of great earthquakes, the sun turning black, and non-believers being thrown into a lake of fire. Houteff believed that these days were coming much sooner than the Seventh-day Adventists believed. He claimed that he was the Christ of the last days, the Lamb of Revelation. He believed that only he could interpret the true meaning of the occurrences told in the book of Revelation, and only through him could his followers be saved from suffering. Those who followed Houteff would establish a new kingdom by the end of the last days, reigning over all. The Davidians were born. Victor Houteff established the beginning of the Davidian kingdom in Waco, Texas, naming it Mount Carmel. Though his beliefs could be seen by many as the ramblings of a madman, he began to gain a small community of followers. In 1955, Houteff passed away, and his legacy was taken over by Benjamin Roden. He spoke of hearing messages from God, begging him to finish the work that Houteff started. Many doubted Roden and his claims, one of which was Houteff's widow, Florence. According to her, if Roden was really meant to lead the Davidians, he would know that the world would end in 1959. The group was divided. They didn't know who to believe. Did they follow Roden and his supposed messages from God, or Florence, whose late husband they had trusted with their lives? When the world failed to come to an end in 1959, Florence left Mount Carmel, and Roden took full control of the group, now called the Branch Davidians. The group grew in their beliefs and followers until 1978, when Roden also passed away. They were in need of a new leader, but who? Who could they trust to carry on the teaching that the two had left behind? How would they know if they could find someone who was really the voice of God? Vernon Howell was a troubled man. He was born to a broken family with a 15-year-old mother and struggled immensely in school. He was bullied, had dyslexia, and ultimately dropped out. Although his school life was in shambles, he took a particular interest in the Bible and prophecy. He wanted to find a place where he truly belonged and where he could be accepted for his prophetic talents. The only place he could think to turn was to a church family who would support his prophetic endeavors. Unshockingly, the church he chose to join was the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Waco, Texas. Howell believed that he finally found his place in the world, but he was wrong. Howell was deemed by the church to be a bad influence on the youth, and was accused of mercilessly pursuing the pastor's daughter. Left again without a place to belong, he began searching. It was then that he discovered the Branch Davidians. Unlike the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the Davidians welcomed Howell's proposed gift of prophecy, causing him to gain popularity. The only person that was suspicious of Howell's ramblings was Benjamin Roden's son, George. The power struggle between the two lasted until George was arrested for murder. Upon George's arrest, Howell jumped on the opportunity to become leader of the group. He changed his name to David Koresh to symbolize his transformation into king of the Branch Davidians, and took control of the group in the late 1980s. Koresh proved to be very convincing in his philosophies, converting over 100 people to the Davidian belief. Until then, the group was almost harmless, but Koresh began to use the cult to pursue his own interests. He began to take multiple sexual partners, some of which were as young as 10 years old. In addition to this, since the group believed that the apocalypse would soon be upon them, they began to prepare the best way they knew how. weapons. It was then that the legal system began to take notice of the Branch Davidians. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms had reason to believe that Koresh was manufacturing and harboring over 250 illegal weapons in his compound. In 1992, the Bureau launched an investigation into Mount Carmel. An ominous tone cast over the entire compound when the ATF's investigation was proven to be true. The Branch Davidians were preparing for mass destruction. The Bureau knew what had to be done. On February 8, 1993, ATF agents arrived at Mount Carmel with a warrant for the seizure of the dangerous weapons the group possessed. The agents arrived with the intention to be swift and efficient, but the Branch Davidians were prepared for their arrival in the worst way possible. When the agents arrived, David Koresh sat unassumingly on his front porch. The agents relaxed slightly, hopeful that the arrest and confiscation would be an easy fight. They informed Koresh that they had a warrant to search the property. The seconds of silence between the parties were deafening, until Koresh swiftly retreated inside his house, and gunshots catapulted through the front door. The agents immediately retreated, firing shots back in defense. This gunfight would continue for 2.5 hours, resulting in 28 wounded and 4 deceased ATF agents. After the initial gunfight, Koresh released 24 children to the ATF. By this point, the ATF agents knew that they needed help after the wounds they had suffered. The FBI became involved to end this confrontation. They attempted to negotiate with Koresh for the release of innocent members, which lasted almost 3 days. When this didn't work, they played extremely loud music in an attempt to exhaust the members, tiring them into submission. Despite their efforts, the standoff would last for 51 days. By the 51st day, the agents were exhausted and at a loss. How could they make this grueling war end? They couldn't just leave, knowing the weapons the group had. They would be putting millions of people in danger by allowing them to have access to such destruction. They had to do something, but how could they protect the innocent lives inside? As they attempted to gain entry, the compound quickly became engulfed in flames. Only 9 cult members had escaped the fire. The other 75 members of the cult died by their own hands. The fire was set by the Branch Davidians as a dramatic end to their decades-long mission, with many members discovered to have gunshot wounds inflicted by other Davidians. The Branch Davidians had unleashed an apocalypse on themselves. Following the carnage, an investigation was launched by the Department of Treasury and Justice to assess what caused such a disastrous event. The people saw this event unfold live on television and were unsatisfied with the procedures that were used by both the ATF and the FBI. Although some steps the agents took were deemed to be questionable, the Department of Treasury and Justice official conclusion was that the agents acted in the best way that they could have in such an alarming, dangerous situation. Although the Davidians quickly disbanded following the siege, they are still remembered in the media to this day. They are known as the group that tried to start a war with their own government. This type of popularity fueled the Branch Davidians to reoccupy Mount Carmel. One of the survivors of the fire, Clive Doyle, became the new leader of the Branch Davidians. Doyle was joined by a second group, known as the Branch, on the site of the destruction. It is led by Charles Pace, who, although was a Branch Davidian, he did not follow David Koresh's teachings. Pace is determined to resurrect the true Davidians in their original glory. Cults can be harmless, but they can also prove to be extremely dangerous when members are willing to die and cause death for what they believe. The events of Waco show that when one person gains too much power, corruption follows. What do you think will happen with the new group of Davidians? Will history repeat itself? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to see more videos just like this. Until next time.